Hello everyone, welcome to McQueeb's first ever tier list. Today we're going to be covering the perks available in the game Noita. Noita, for those that haven't ever played the game before, is a roguelike where every pixel is simulated. Perks definitely help you throughout the game. Choosing the right perks can really give you the benefit of a better run and hopefully progressing further in an otherwise very difficult game. So we're going to go through the perks. This is obviously my opinion, not everybody else's, because I know I have some contentious views. I'm going to explain why I place certain perks where I do, and hopefully you're going to get a kick out of going through these with me. You may not agree, but that's completely fine. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me just explain sort of the categories here. S tier is exceptional, must-have perks, ones that you cannot live without. A, very good. Some of the best ones that you will come across, definitely something to prioritize over certain other ones going through the game. B, occasionally useful ones that you could live with or live without. Category C, little to no value. So this probably doesn't harm you picking it up, but at the same time is not going to really help you out all that much. And then category D, detrimental. So things that actively work against you, in my opinion. Increased critical hit. So this gives you a greater chance to activate a critical hit, which does extra damage upon your shots. It affects all of the player's spells. There's not a lot to it. It's a good perk, but I think that's where it goes. It doesn't come into the realm of exceptional. It certainly is not no value, but I think we're going to place it in B for now. So it's a perk that I would normally pick up if I came across it. If there was something better, I would definitely not option to get it. Next, we have Breathless. Now, this is something that most people don't rate very highly. Breathless allows you to breathe underwater. You're immune to suffocation on liquids, as well as solids or powders that you may be trapped underneath. I like it quite a lot, but it's very situational. Same as critical up, I'm going to place it as a B, one that you would get occasionally. Next, we have Greed. This gives you double the gold from pickups. It doesn't work on gold dust, it only works on gold nuggets that come from kills. So I'm actually going to put this one under A. It's one of those ones where, especially during the late stages of the game, you could be earning so much more money, which gives you, more options to reroll perks, and it also gives you more options to purchase better spells or wands towards the end of the game. If you get it early enough, if there's not many other options to choose from, it's something that can definitely be helpful as well. Next, we have Trick Greed, environmental kills. Net you 2 times the amount of gold nuggets from a death of an enemy. This gives you 4 times, so it doubles the effectiveness of environmental kills. So that's kills from explosions, fire, drowning, being crushed by physical objects, that kind of thing. It's good, but only occasionally. So this is something I'm going to place under B. Next, we have Strong Levitation. So this is something that allows you to double the flight power that you have. It doesn't change anything about your horizontal movement. It's literally only the amount of time you can stay levitated for. So this one I'm going to place under A. An excellent perk. All right, next we have Faster Movement. This makes your character move horizontally about 40% faster. If you're a speedrunner, this is something that's a no-brainer. I'm going to put this under very good as well. Almost in the category of exceptional, except for the fact that it does make you slightly more vulnerable. You're open to attacks, you move faster, you don't have as much accuracy during movement throughout levels. Next, we have Low Gravity. I'm going to place this one quite low on the list. In fact, I would go so far as to say it is detrimental to the average player because it leaves you open to so many more attacks. The gravity is reduced so you can stay airborne longer, but you fall a lot slower as well, and that brings with it pretty significant downsides, not the least of which is being able to be sniped from afar while you're in the air with not a lot of control as you're falling. Next, we have Faster Swimming. It does exactly what it says on the can. It lets you swim faster. I would put this along with Breathless. It's a good perk, and it's one that I rate highly, but it's not one that I would always take. So for that reason, I'm going to put it as occasionally useful. Next is never skip leg day. So this is kind of fun. I'm going to place it under little to no value. It's not detrimental to have it, really. What this does, it increases the damage and the effectiveness of your kicks. So you can kick things much, much further, and you do a lot more damage. In saying that, the amount of damage you do is negligible compared to an enemy's health. So it's not like you'll be running through the game kicking things to death, unless they're frozen. But again, the amount of damage you're doing at that point doesn't matter. So little to no value is where I'm going to place that one. It's not a detriment, but it's take it or leave it, right? If it's the only thing that's there and it's free, why not? But otherwise, yeah, I would definitely skip it. Next, you have Repelling Cape. The stains drop at a fast rate whilst moving. This has positives and negatives. Generally, I would say it's a positive, and for that reason, I'm going to place it in the very good category with a minor caveat, and that's that it's difficult to maintain stains that you actually want to have on you. So for example, Berserkium, you can still apply them as long as you're standing still. The minute you start moving, it falls off you very quickly. You are then open to damage from various sources. Without fire protection, it's kind of dangerous to even have at all. But on the plus side, things like toxic slime fall off you very quickly. You know, usually before you can even wash it off now, since slime is so viscous. So I'm going to put it as very good with a little asterisk next to it. Next we have Exploding Corpses. I'm going to say little to no value here. It causes more damage than anything else. It scatters corpses, it scatters gold, and can potentially even break flasks and things that are nearby. It's not bad, but at the same time, it doesn't really have much of a use at all. Next, we've got Saving Grace. This is an odd one. If you're starting out the game, I would place it as very good. As you get more experience with the game, I would move that down the list quite substantially. So for that reason, I'm going to compromise and put it as occasionally useful. This will save you from death. If there is a hit that would otherwise kill you, you'll survive with 1 HP remaining. I've seen professional grade players use it to their advantage and successfully survive as a result. But no, it's something that I don't take it. There's too many other better perks out there that will allow you to get further in the game, in my opinion. My playstyle is slightly different than most. I tend to opt for longer runs, and at that stage of the game, you don't need it. You've got so much health and so many ways to refill that health that it's not really necessary. All right, next we have Invisibility. As long as you're not stained, you will be unable to be seen by most enemies in the game. There's a couple late stage that will be able to still see you, but it's a very good perk. It's able to, potentially save your life. You can skip through entire stages, essentially, without even being seen. It's funny, these two are next to each other because they work very well in partnership. If you have no stains on you, after 5 seconds, you become invisible, and then from there on, as long as you're not shooting, you remain invisible. So it is very powerful. Next, we have More Blood. When the player gets hit, as well as enemies, when they get hit, they bleed more. There's literally more blood. It can be somewhat detrimental if you're not careful, because it can flood an entire stage with blood. The more corpses that pile up, specifically if you use things like chainsaws or the drilling shots, you can cause quite a lot of mayhem in that regard. So I'm going to place this one, for me personally, little to no value. I wouldn't say it's detrimental by default, but you can be in a situation where you are literally drowning in blood. All right, next we have All-Seeing Eye. So this is very handy. All-Seeing Eye has been improved since its initial inception, back when the game was first released. It now allows for sight everywhere. So that's the dark cave, the magical temple, the tree, the whole 9 yards. You can literally see everything. Not only that, you can see into spaces that you might not have otherwise been able to see into. So things like little alcoves that have not yet been lit up, that kind of thing is actually very important. You can see enemies that aren't yet even in your immediate field of vision. And for that reason, I'm going to put it as top tier. It's an excellent spell. Would I take it over some of the others that end up in the top tier? Maybe not, but it's one of the best spells in the game, in my opinion. Next, we have Vampirism. So Vampirism enables you to drink blood at the cost of 33% of your maximum health. But you have the ability to regain health now by drinking blood. For me, the amount of health you regain during that drinking process is so minuscule, it's not even worth it. I'm going to place it C, little to no value. It's one that I would hardly ever take. Next, we have extra HP. So this gives you 50% extra maximum health. Early on in the game, this is not the best spell to take. I would say it's a good spell. I'm going to put it occasionally useful because it's not really beneficial until you already have a large amount of health. If you're 3 levels deep and you've got 200 health, it's going to give you 100, but then entering the 3rd or 4th level, you're going to take so much damage that it's not going to make too much of a difference really. Now again, if you have 1,000 health nearing the end of the game, it's going to give you 500 health, which is a pretty significant chunk at that stage, and will let you continue on further than you might have otherwise been able to. Next, now this is one that is definitely hotly contested amongst the community. This one is called Extra HP. It essentially doubles the health pickups that you get along the way. So the health pickups usually give you 25. With one of these, it gives you 50. Let's put it in A for now. We may adjust, but yes, this is something that I rate very highly, especially when taken early on. The amount of health you can get from a standard run, if you fully clear most of the levels, is pretty exceptional. And with that, it's off the charts. Next, so Glass Cannon reduces your maximum HP to 50, and that cannot be increased except from the full health recharges that give you an additional 10 when you reach a holy mountain. The significant benefit to Glass Cannon is that you do 5 times the amount of damage and your explosions are 5 times larger. You can cause a lot of chaos with this. If you've got a bunch of immunities already, then it's amazing. It is kind of situational. I wouldn't necessarily take Glass Cannon on a normal run that I really wanted to see the end of. It's more for memes or, you know, specialized runs. It's very fun. There's no denying that. It's one of the most fun perks to have in the game. I'm going to place it right here. Occasionally useful. So next we have Extra Life. This respawns you after death with 100 health. It doesn't take you out of whatever dangerous situation you were previously in. It merely allows you to hopefully continue the run. You still have only 100 health after that. It's very similar to Saving Grace in that regard. I'm going to place it, in fact, on the same level as Saving Grace. Again, it's one that I probably wouldn't pick up necessarily. That's where that goes for me right here. I can see it being beneficial, definitely, and especially if you're new to the game, don't hesitate to pick it up. It's something that will definitely help you, but for your more experienced, seasoned player, I would just skip it. There's not much point. Next, we have Worm Attractor, or Worm Love. Causes worms to be attracted towards the player's general area, but not necessarily the player. Seems to also increase the rate of giant worms and decrease the rate of smaller worms. I'm going to say this is little to no value, and that's just from personal experience. The number of times that I've gotten it, it doesn't really do a lot. I rarely see it work. I don't see new worms being spawned. It's if there's one around, it will follow you. The other effect I wasn't aware of, the fact that it increases the chance of the larger worms to spawn. So the reason I bring that up is when you kill a larger worm, they're quite tough. They've got a lot of HP. When you kill one, it can drop a health up, which is obviously, again, very beneficial. I'm afraid I'm going to put this one as little to no value. That's just from personal experience. Yeah, I don't see a huge use out of that. Now, on the flip side, Worm Detractor, worms of the world run from you. This can be quite good. I would rather take that than Worm Attractor, just because it keeps them away from you. They are quite difficult to kill, as I was saying before. I'm going to place this one as occasionally useful. If it's there, I might pick it up, I might skip it. Next, we come into some of the immunities. Now, this is where things are going to probably shift more towards the exceptional and very good regions. So we'll start with fire. Fire immunity is amazing. It's one of those ones that you would rarely not take it. I'm going to place it in the exceptional category. The amount of fire that you come across in the game and the speed at which it can damage you, I would definitely rate, yeah, fire immunity as an exceptional perk. Next, we have toxic sludge immunity. Same deal. Toxic sludge is absolutely everywhere in the game, and as of the last patch, they've actually made it even more of a challenge to get rid of. I mentioned earlier that it's quite viscous now. You need a lot more water to remove it. For that reason, toxic sludge immunity is also an exceptional perk. Next, we have explosion immunity. I'm going to place that one a little bit lower. It's great, and I usually take it most of the time, but I'm going to put it as an A level perk. If you're careful and you're slow to progress through the game, you shouldn't come across too many explosions that you're unaware of. It can happen, definitely. Like, Explosive canisters can be hidden in snow, under bodies, but most of the time you're going to be aware of your surroundings. For that reason only, it's going one step lower. If I had the choice between explosion immunity and these two, there's no way I would take explosion first up. Other people might disagree, but I tend to be quite aware of my surroundings when I play, as I think most Noita players should, and for that reason it's staying right where it is. Next we have one of the top 3 perks in the game, and that's melee immunity. Much like the other two, it can be very, very helpful. More so early on, you have quite a lot of enemies that can do melee damage. The jungle, full of enemies that can do melee damage. And then Temple of the Art, the second last level, there's 3-4 different types of enemies that can all do melee damage, and a significant amount. One in particular that it's really good defense against is the squids that you'll find in the fungal caverns in the beginning of the game. They have quite a lot of range on them. They can hit you very quickly, and even when you think you're out of range, they still have a chance to sometimes whack you for 25 damage, which isn't insignificant. On top of that, if you're frozen and you get hit with a melee attack, it's almost certainly instant kill for you. So having that kind of defense is amazing, and for that reason it's going to end up in the exceptional area. Next we have electricity immunity. It's very good. Same kind of situation that explosion immunity ends up in. Sometimes electricity is very easy to spot, so you can stay away from it. If you have an electric weapon, that's when it comes into its own, but I would not take it over one of the previously mentioned immunities. It is still very good, but it's not quite of that level just yet. Next, we have teleportitis. Teleportitis is one of those, I'm not sure why it's in the game kind of situations. It could be beneficial possibly to a speedrunner that knows exactly what's going on, and they know where they're headed, and they're not too worried about damage. In fact, they might even self-immolate to propel themselves forward. How this works, whenever the player takes damage, they are subject to teleportation. It's reasonably random, and I don't believe you can control it. I'm going to put it in the detrimental category. It's one that I would never take, except for a meme run, maybe. It's a weird one. Again, I'm not sure why it's in the game. It's very hazardous to have it, and you just might find yourself in a pool of lava. Next, we have stainless armor. This is another one that is very, very good as long as you don't have stains on you. So again, in combination with invisibility and repelling cape, I'm going to put it on the A tier for that reason alone. I can't give it an exceptional. It's very, very good, and I do often take it. Next, we have everybody's favorite perk, edit ones everywhere. There's no question in my mind, this is the best perk in the game. If you have the option to take it, always do, please. It's so helpful for a number of different reasons. You don't need to go back to the Holy Mountain to edit wands, or you don't need to wait until the next Holy Mountain to edit wands, which means that you can sort of pick and choose spells as you're going through the level. You can sort of harvest wands that you find and discard them if they're no good, but you can take all the, the really good spells off there. So you can change even the way that you're playing mid-run, which is extremely helpful. Without question, it's the best perk in the game. Take it always, please. You will be doing yourself a huge favor. Next, we have bombs materialized. So what this does, it places any static explosion spell in your flask inventory, where your flasks and tablets sit. I guess it has some value, occasionally, maybe, but only like, yeah, no, I can't. This is little to no value. If you're in a situation where you need to use bombs, but you can't afford to use a wand slot to have those bombs, you've got bigger problems to worry about than merely, carrying bombs. Plus, there's so many other methods of digging through terrain that bombs and death cross and, spells like this, no, I can't in good conscience place it higher than that. So, next is, I'm probably going to cop a lot of flack for this. I don't like the homing perk. This is no surprise to anyone that's watched any of my content before. The homing spell modifier is amazing. You're able to put shots where you want them to go. Homing perk means every single shot that you fire, you have no control once you've picked it up. 99% of the spells that you cast will home in towards the nearest enemy. If that spell is a damaging spell to the player and another enemy happens to be on the opposite side of you, it's going to come back through you, whether you like it or not. I'm not going to say it's detrimental, and it's not quite little to no value, because in a pinch, let's say you're on a really good run, but you don't have the right stuff to really kick off like a homing mist spell or a homing death cross spell or something of that nature, you could in theory use it, but other spells become worsened, right? So for example, your black hole spell, an excellent digging tool that is almost rendered useless because now it's going off and doing its own thing. It's going to home in towards other enemies. You want to dig straight down or straight through something, but it's got other things in mind. So I'm going to put it as B, occasionally useful. I know there's going to be some community members that disagree with me, and that's completely fine, but my personal opinion is that it's a no-go. While we're on the subject of changing the trajectory of spells, we've got Boomerang Shot. Boomerang can be useful in very few situations, but again, I'm talking about the spell modifier. It's not something that I would want permanently active all the time. This I'm going to place as detrimental. It's just that whenever you fire a spell, you want it to go forward, I would assume, right? Or homing in towards an enemy, not coming back towards yourself. It's only really good for healing spells. Maybe if you've got like a digging tool, like a mist that has got boomerang attached to it with Matter Eater, something like that allows you to get through terrain. Otherwise, no. Again, that's one of those ones that it's a weird one. Next, we have Freeze Field. So this casts an aura around the player. It freezes all liquid around the player. It can be somewhat useful, but I find it to be more detrimental because it restricts your movement, especially when trying to get underwater and you have to dig through the water to get to where you want to go. It's not really pleasant. For me, I'm going to put it occasionally useful. Next, we have Dissolve Powders. So sand and other soft powdery materials dissolve quickly in your presence. You can essentially walk through sand or gunpowder, anything like that. Even coal in the mines you can walk through. It's good, but not the most useful. And in certain situations, it can make traversal kind of difficult. All right, so we're going to put it there as occasionally useful. Next, actually a perk that's been improved over time. It's called Bleed Slime. You would get hit and slime would come out of you. The problem with it was that slime slows you down pretty severely. Now, it did have a hidden stat of minus 40% projectile damage, which is pretty amazing in its own right. I just don't feel that in its previous form it would have ranked very highly at all. Nowadays, though, they've altered it so that slime doesn't slow you down. Later in the game, if you're using slime projectiles, it's kind of a must-have later on. I'm going to rate it A, very good. It's teetering on S tier right now, but yeah, for now it's going to stay A, very good. Next, we have Oil Blood. You bleed oil. It comes with it another hidden stat. This one's 40% explosion damage reduction. The problem with oil is twofold. It makes you very slippery and it burns very quickly. I'm going to say this is detrimental to have. It's something that I would never pick it up. It's one of those ones that I would just quite readily avoid, in fact. Next, we have Permanent Shield. You gain a small permanent shield. This provides a defensive shield around the player. I'm going to put it as exceptional. It is a potential run saver. Not only do projectiles potentially bounce off of you, now not every projectile, if a projectile is moving fast enough, like a sniper bullet for example, you'll still take damage, but the amount of damage you can mitigate over a run because of shield is immense. It really is. I'm currently working on a no damage run right now, which means not taking any damage throughout the game. Shield is one of the must-haves. Later in the game, there's a few enemies that cast a projectile that polymorphs you. It's essentially a spell that turns you into a sheep. Problem is that sheep has 1 HP, and any damage you receive after that, it's an instant kill. Doesn't matter how much health you had before, you could have 10,000 health, and it's just gone. So this has saved my butt on more than one occasion. Revenge Explosion. This is another weird one. So whenever you take damage, the explosion hurts enemies. The problem is that that explosion can also activate things like pools of oil. It's terrible. Don't take it. It's more risk to have it than it is to not. There's no question about it. I'm going to say this is detrimental. It can be fun later on, especially if you're immune to explosions, but just keep in mind, you can still activate other explosions. Maybe you're standing next to a frozen liquid tank and all of a sudden you're dead. So just be very, very mindful if you are going to take it. Anything on this bottom row is strictly meme arena, if you ask me. Revenge Tentacle, much like the explosion, it's not as bad, I don't think, although it's just weird to have a tentacle spewing out from you. The description says that you call a monstrous tentacle against those who harm you, causes a tentacle to emerge from the player and hit anything that damages the player. This also includes taking damage from various passive sources of damage like lava or damage over time effects, causing the tentacle to sometimes flail randomly. May also attack creatures that fire healing projectiles. It will kill a healer that is healing you. It's not as bad as the explosion perk, but it's definitely not great either. I'm going to put little to no value on that one. Next, we have Leukemia mutation. You grow curious additional limbs that fight for you. Slightly increases movement speed and gives player unlimited flight, but the player can only fly while at least one limb is touching a solid surface. These limbs will attack nearby explosives as well as enemies. That's not something you want if you don't have the correct immunities going into a fight. I rarely take it. It's not great. It has ended more than one of my runs just because it has a tendency to hit other objects. It's fun to see the witch grow spider legs and run around the stage. Where would I even put this? I'm going to say little to no value. Not quite detrimental, but it's borderline. Plague rats. Here's an interesting one. Every time you kill an enemy, they spawn a rat that fights alongside. Later stages, especially in New Game Plus, enemies have so much health, especially if you're hitting an enemy that's spawning a bunch of different smaller enemies. The number of rats can be overwhelming. It can break a run. It's happened to me more than once. Now that I know how it works, I would probably actively avoid it. For now, detrimental. Next, projectile repulsion field. Most projectiles are repulsed by your presence, but you take 26% more projectile damage to any projectiles that are able to get through that. This is a very good perk, especially going back to my no hit runs. It's one that is kind of a must-have. It's not quite exceptional because your accuracy is reduced. It's very good. It's not quite in the exceptional range, but yeah, I tend to take it most of the times it's available. So electricity adds an immunity to electricity. That's the first thing, but your entire body becomes a conduit. So you're constantly zapping the area around you. So liquids, steel, and even large piles of gold become electrified, which is great for killing enemies, but it's also a pain for a few reasons. One, if there's any explosive boxes or canisters on a metallic surface that you go near, you could potentially spark them and explode them without meaning to. Trying to get healed by a healer is almost impossible now as a result. And unless you can do that at a safe distance, it becomes kind of difficult. I'm going to put it as B, occasionally useful. It's one that I would take in a pinch if I really, really needed. You've got to weigh up the good and the bad with that one. So it's going into occasionally useful. Attract gold. So previously, this used to be attract physical objects, so it would bring gold and flasks towards you. That was a nightmare because the flask could contain something extremely dangerous. Polymorphium, lava, acid, you name it, right? Like there's a bunch of stuff that you just didn't want near you, and it wasn't worth the risk in, maybe collecting a little bit of extra gold. Now that it's been changed so that only the golden nuggets get drawn towards you, it's not a bad perk. It can still potentially knock over things that are on fire, move stuff out of the way, bring explosive objects potentially towards you if the gold was on the opposite side of that. It's not too bad. Most of those things are quite easy to avoid, so I'm going to put it as B, occasionally useful. It's a good spell, but take it or leave it. You don't really need it. Most of the times, it doesn't draw the gold in from far enough a distance away that you can't just go and pick it up anyway. You might lose out on, over the course of a run, a couple of hundred gold because you didn't get there in time. Not worth it. So yeah, B. Next, we've got extra enemy knockback. This is one that I don't rate very highly at all. I tend to want to keep enemies in my field of fire. So when I'm aiming at an enemy, if they're constantly being knocked back, that means I have to adjust on the fly. It's not a position I really want to find myself in. Is it detrimental? Not really, but it's not really useful either. I'm going to put that as C, little to no value. And next we have concentrated spells. Spells have a lower spread, but they push you back more. In addition to the direct benefit of more accurate spells, the added recoil can be used as a crude jetpack or jump extender by firing opposite of where you wish to go. Might slow digging operations as you would push back while you're digging without careful spell arrangement. To me, this goes back to the difference between a perk and a spell modifier. To me, this is not worth picking up because of that secondary effect, that knockback effect. I prefer to move forward and approach the enemy. It becomes very frustrating just to try to advance. Useful for flying, yes. For me, it's a detrimental spell. Next, bouncing spells. Almost all of your spells bounce around. This perk will cause spells like Energy Orb and Magic Missile to no longer immediately detonate on impact with terrain. As a result, their digging potential becomes greatly hampered. There's two types of spells that I really do enjoy using. One of them is the Energy Orb for its digging purposes exclusively. This for me would be very bad, and I think for most people, depends on which style of player you are and which types of weapons you like to use. But for me, it's detrimental. I'm not going to put it in the detrimental category because realistically you can sort of work around the negatives that are associated with it. If you're the type of person that likes a very fast firing multi-projectile weapon, then it's not necessarily a bad thing. For me, it's not something I would take. I'm going to put it in little to no value. Extra perk, it gives you, instead of 3 to choose from in the following Holy Mountain, it gives you 4. It's good. I'm not going to say it's a must-have. It's not one that I would prioritize above others unless I had no other option. Some argument is that the following Holy Mountain and the subsequent ones beyond that, you have a greater chance of getting better perks. But I feel like the value of the perk that you just missed out on by taking that is worth more. It's a personal choice. I am going to rate it as very good, but it's just not one that I personally would take all of the time. Next, this is one of my favorite ones actually, just because of its random nature. Perk Lottery is an excellent perk. Essentially, when you pick it up, perks have a 50% chance to remain on the field. When you pick this up, it has a chance to fire, which means you could pick it up and potentially get 1 or 2 other perks in that moment. And moving forward, extra perk here and there doesn't hurt. It doesn't always fire, even though it says 50% chance. I'm leaning towards a slightly lower number than that. It doesn't seem to fire as much as I would like, but when it goes off, it is a really nice surprise. I'm going to rate it as exceptional. It's one that I generally take above other perks, but at the same time, would I rate it above Edit Ones Everywhere? If you had melee immunity, Edit Ones Everywhere, and Perk Lottery available, do you pick up Perk Lottery in the hopes that it would fire and you could potentially get Edit Ones Everywhere? I'm going to say no. The risk at losing something as strong as Edit Ones Everywhere is too great. Next, more hatred. It makes enemies fight amongst each other. It's good, but it comes with it a pretty hefty price tag. Whenever enemies die off screen, their gold that you would have otherwise been able to pick up if you were close enough, just forget about it. Like, it's already disappeared by the time you get there. It does make levels slightly safer because there's less enemies for you to combat yourself. One pretty significant disadvantage of picking up more hatred is the fact that your PC will take a nosedive, especially later on in the game. The computational power, I guess, required to keep enemies fighting off screen is so great. To me, it's a no-go. I would say it's detrimental at this point. It does make the game slightly easy, but the downsides far outweigh the positives there. More love is the opposite. Okay, so enemies don't fight amongst themselves, even if they're natural enemies in the game. Ordinarily, I would have said that it's kind of just very boring, right? Like, there's not much to it. It just makes it so that you've got more enemies to fight during the game, which I guess in turn means you would have more gold to pick up. But a nice little side effect is that, especially on longer runs, being polymorphed, turned into a sheep, and again instantly killed, is probably the greatest risk to any extended run. Regardless of what, immunities you have, how much health you have, you can be essentially one-shot by something that you weren't quite paying attention to. This alleviates that somewhat. If you're in an area where you're taking damage, regardless if there's fire or acid or something like that, you will still die. However, it stops enemies from attacking you when you're a sheep. So for that reason, I'm going to place it in the very good category. that's the way I would rate perks. As a nice little bonus, let's go through the exceptional perks real quick in which order I would sort of look at taking those. For me, edit ones, like I said, number 1, the greatest perk you can possibly get. Number 2, melee immunity. It's one of those ones that is so beneficial. Perk Lottery would be next. Probably fire, immunity, and toxic, and shield, and then finally all-seeing eye. That would be the order in which I would pick those up. So that's it. That's my brief introduction to the perks of the game, how I would rate them, which ones to avoid. I hope you really enjoyed this little look into everything today. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been McQueeb signing off. You can catch me most nights over at twitch.tv/McQueeb. That's McQueeb.